Welcome to That's a Hard No, the podcast about learning to say no and set boundaries to live our best lives. I'm your host, Heather Drago. You may think, because of this podcast, that I'm a boundary setting expert, but I'm not. I'm an expert at struggling to set boundaries. But you know what? I'm working on it, and it is getting easier. Follow along with me as I learn from fellow strugglers and experts so that you too can start saying no without feeling fear, guilt, or FOMO.
You don't know where to go. Unfriendly applications got you feeling low. You're not sure what to do. Weight of expectations is coming down on you. There's a phrase you should know. Tastes so much sweeter than hello. That's a hard no.
We've all heard the phrase, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But have you ever stopped to consider what that means? Classically, we think of play as something that's a waste of time. Just something kids do because they don't yet have to handle hard work and the rigors of adult life. In our modern age, however, we've discovered all the ways that engaging in play changes the way we grow, the way we learn, and more. As it turns out, play is a powerful tool for making us happier, healthier, and even more productive. There's a famous quote by Dr. Simon Sutton Smith: "The opposite of play is not work, it's depression." Somehow we've set up this false dichotomy that we're wasting time when we take time to let loose and have fun. How do we find play for ourselves, and how do we help our young kids learn the power of play, but also a healthy relationship with work and learning? Our guest today is an expert in all of it. Wendy Pavicic is a pediatric occupational therapist with 20 years of experience working with children and families in all sorts of settings, in schools, in an outpatient setting, and now in her own private practice. She helps kids and their families find the best outcome with their developmental or physical issues. Wendy, welcome to the show. What do we lose when we don't make time for play?
Well, if you think about where we start off as little ones, and what is the prime occupation? I'm an occupational therapist, a pediatric occupational therapist. If you think about what the prime occupation of children is, it's play. We learn through play. When we are little, when we are young, we expect children to partake in play, and we know that it is important. And then as we age, other roles, other occupations as adults start to filter in, and we have to adopt and adapt to new roles and occupations that we have, and very often play falls by the wayside.
Yeah, it sure does.
But it is still an important piece for adults as far as learning, continuing to develop cognitively, and to build continued brain pathways, as well as joy, and what play provides for adults as far as, we know that when we partake in play in things that we enjoy as adults, the serotonin release that happens in the brain, and we feel good. And when we feel good, we are better functioning adults. In today's world, we spend so much time looking at our responsibilities, and we have lost the emphasis of play for adults. As well as movement. I feel like play, from my perspective, play and movement very much go hand in hand. We were not meant to be sedentary creatures.
Right.
We were meant to move and groove. We were hunter and gatherers, way back when. We are upright for a reason, to move forward through space. And I feel like that kind of incorporates play as well.
Right. I think of that old adage, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you just lose just a sense of life.
Yes.
In a way, like your world becomes gray without at least movement, even if you don't consider it play.
Yes.
Just getting out there, smelling the fresh air, hearing
you
the
bring
birds.
up a really good point. I feel like calling it play
Right.
It's like a misnomer. It's like adults are like, well, I don't play. And it's like, okay, well, let's call it something else then. Let's call
Yeah.
it, I feel like we are seeing a resurgence in kind of like the wellness
Yeah.
and self-care. And so maybe we need to, I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it play. I tell people I play for a living. I mean, that's what I do. I play with children for a living.
Yeah.
But maybe if we, call it something different, maybe it adds a little bit more respect to it. Although, like I said, I think there's nothing wrong with calling it play.
Right.
But it's important from, the moment we're born until the moment we're no longer here. That play is very important. It is essential to the overall well-being of each individual.
Right. Depending on the life situation, there are some kids that aren't afforded opportunities to go play outside. So they may have really finely developed fine motor skills, but they're not using their bodies in space as much. Like, what are the side effects or the problems that can arise if a kid isn't playing?
So there's definitely different types of play. If you're looking at like movement-based play, the vestibular system, which is located in our inner ear, is activated through movement. So there's hair cells in the inner ear that are activated when we move. It moves the fluid, yada, yada, sends messages to the brain about where we are in space in relation to the world around us. So kids that don't have movement opportunities, whether it be because of physical limitations or kiddos that we've seen it very often in Eastern European countries where kids in orphanages are just kept in cribs and not given movement opportunities. A myriad of different issues as far as depth perception, spatial awareness, crossing midline issues that plays into, which we will get to, early literacy and literacy, being able to visually track from a left to right sort of perspective. So it is important, even if you have physical limitations, to provide movement opportunities for a child, whether it be playfulness, Superman sort of stuff, picking a kiddo up and moving them.
Or just
getting them on a
dancing to
swing.
music.
Exactly. Sitting with them in a rocking chair. Instead of a static chair, get your kiddo into a rocking chair and let them experience like that. They may not be able to walk or crawl, but they may be able to move their body and activate their muscles enough to rock. And then they get the sensation of, oh, I did that. Yeah. And then it creates more. Success breeds success. So it's figuring out creative ways that, it may not be how, most kids are moving and grooving, but we can still provide those opportunities. Yeah. Walks in strollers, wagons, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And then as adults, turning back to that, I feel like, as you touched on, like feel like we have to give ourselves permission to play or call it something else. And I know that I recently kind of had an epiphany. I've talked about this on the podcast before, where somebody put a social media post out there that said, in case you've forgotten, you don't need to earn rest. Rest is required for being a human being.
Yep.
And so that was like an aha moment. And
Yes.
I also feel like we can say the same thing about play and movement. Like, it's just a requirement of being human. It's not like I have to finish this job first or I have to do all these chores first.
Right.
And then I can make time for movement or play.
Right.
We need to structure it into our lives.
Yes. I'm my oldest, who's 13. She's currently homeschooled, and we're looking for her to have more of a traditional high school experience, though. And so we've been looking at schools, and we just looked at a school, and the young man who was giving us the tour, he was very eloquent and very well prepared for this tour. And he said, as we were walking outside, it's more of like an open campus for a reason, so that the kids can move and walk from class to class, and outside and get that exposure to fresh air and whatnot. And he said, and we moved from having 20-minute lunch periods to a full hour because research shows that movement increases cognitive development and learning in students. And I was like, yes! I was like, oh, this is where she needs to go.
You turn to your kid and say, you're going here. This is where you're going.
Yes, but like that sort of stuff matters.
Yeah.
And in schools these days, there's lots of recess time as well as some of the fine arts, and all of that builds kids' brains. It's
Right.
it's all important. It's not just the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s.
They're not extras.
exactly.
They're necessary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Music, arts.
Both adults and children need play breaks, need movement breaks throughout the day. If you think about the nervous system and the brain, what research has shown is that every 2 hours at a minimum, we need to move. And that's at a minimum. And so whether that be taking a movement break from your desk at work and from the blue light of the computer screen, that is a whole nother tangent I could get off on,
Yeah.
or having a little bit more opportunity for kids to move in the classroom with either brain gym activities or changing classrooms, that sort of thing, just allowing for that movement and that little break. It doesn't even have to be a game or whatnot as far as you're looking at play, but the movement breaks are important, and then embedding in the time for actually kind of free play as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a blue screen all day, multiple blue screens all day long.
Yeah.
And
Do you
I
have the glasses?
Oh,
where they
yeah.
can block?
Yeah. But I do find I get fatigued, especially if I'm really thinking hard or changing gears a lot, which often happens. And just getting up and walking away and getting a change of scenery, getting a glass of water,
It resets
petting
your
my
brain.
dog.
Literally resets your hardwiring.
15 minutes, grab a little snack, come back, and then I'm better for it.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
just able to concentrate better. What is multimodal learning?
So if you think about our senses, we typically think about like taste, hearing, vision, but there are those hidden senses. The vestibular system, which I talked about a little bit earlier before, which senses movement and gives us information on where we are in relation to the world around us. Then there's the proprioceptive sense, which are mechanoreceptors that are in our muscles and joints that give us a sense of where we are in relation to our body. So think about like putting on a coat without needing vision to guide. You know where to put your arm in the coat because you can feel where you are in space. That's proprioception at work. So if you think about multimodal learning, the more senses you can incorporate into a learning activity, the more firing of brain pathways that are going to happen to help make a mental map of whatever the activity or the skill is. So let's...
I have a great example of this.
Okay.
So as soon as you started talking, I was like, oh, I know what that is. My oldest child went to, it wasn't an official preschool. I just signed him up for every preschool class at this nature center. It's kind of near where both you and I live. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And the teacher there was amazing. And she would do things like make homemade Play-Doh and use Kool-Aid as the colorant because it had a scent.
Yes.
So she had the color, the scent. They were tactily touching it.
Yep.
She had classical music playing.
Yes. So if you're linking it to like literacy, you like, let's say they're working on the letter S. Instead of just hearing the sound, instead of just seeing it, here's the letter S, or just writing it over and over, here's the letter S, here's the letter S. Let's form it out of clay that has a scent. Then let's move our bodies, using,
Let's be snakes.
Let's be snakes.
Yeah.
All of that is giving.
And here's a snake to look at in real life. Make one out of clay.
It's making more brain connections, and it makes the learning, like I said, more easier to recall, locks it in, as well as providing that enjoyment. You're adding in that play piece. So learning is play. Play is learning. So it's all connected.
So interesting. We're always talking about neural pathways and how we can, that neuroplasticity. Even as adults, how we can rewire our brains. It's just amazing to me what the brain is capable of.
Yes.
What are some examples of multimodal learning people can do at home with their kids?
So adding in, like I said, the movement. So if you're reading a book, for instance, acting it out. You can read it. You can act it out. If you're looking at trying to improve letter formation with a child, as far as like pre-writing, writing. One of my favorite things to do is have parents make little letter boards where with glue you're going to make the letter, again, like maybe going back to S, make the letter an S, and then put sand on it, let it dry, and then you're tracing, you're adding in that tactile component of
that's fun.
of making
And having
the
the
S.
kid make it with the glue
Exactly.
and everything. So
Yes.
they have the whole, all the steps.
Exactly.
How fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're studying something where the kids have the opportunity to build, to actually make, something out of creative materials, it's going to, again, kind of enforce having the kids get the materials, get up and move, make it a scavenger hunt to then, in preparation to then complete whatever the functional task is.
Or even an outdoor scavenger hunt. Let's go find everything orange and just go for a walk outside, and it's fall right now, grabbing leaves. Let's make a collage with everything we find that's orange or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
music is a wonderful, turning things into songs, is a wonderful way to add in rhythm and that auditory piece to help kids remember information.
We had some speech language pathologists on. They talked about rhyming and how rhyming and sequencing is so important for language acquisition. Is there a movement component of that?
Absolutely. So if you think about reading and writing, we move from a left, at least English, we move from a left to right progression. So setting up systems, it's very much kind of like a Montessori sort of mentality. They set up systems for kids where they have to do things in an order from left to right. So even just setting opportunities up for kids to where they're not reading, but they're doing something, completing something in a left to right fashion is a wonderful way to incorporate early literacy. So, busy mom in the kitchen, no, I can't play with you right now. Can't play. Ah, darn it. I have to fulfill my role, my occupation of cook right now. Include the kid out. Set up a couple ingredients in a left to right fashion that they're going to put in the bowl, or the pot. That it can be that simple as far as a left to right system. Also, crossing the body midline through any activity, very easy to set up those sorts of activities. If you think about when we are reading, we move, again, from left to right across a page, but we have to cross a midline. There are a lot of kids where crossing midline is difficult. And it starts with the body before the eyes are going to be able to do it. So setting up opportunities and play opportunities to where they have to reach across their body to do something.
Interesting.
If you're doing a art craft specifically, if they're right-handed, set the scissors over to the left and see if they will reach with their right hand. Hand clapping games. Is exactly right. It's also adding in, again, when you're talking about multimodal, there's a rhythm to it. So it's that
singing.
auditory, you're singing, and you're moving as well.
That's so interesting. I'm a big proponent of including kids in cooking. I think there's so many opportunities for learning.
So much. Math skills and
words
and all of
and senses and taste and all the things.
All the smells, from the cook. All of that.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be back with Wendy and a lot more great information. That's a Hard No is brought to you by Clever Grow Marketing, my full-service agency specializing in smart, strategic marketing solutions for businesses and nonprofits. Okay, so you're probably wondering, Heather, what's with the podcast about boundaries? Why not marketing? Well, maybe in the future, but for now, it actually does relate, so bear with me here. Smart marketing, strategic marketing, requires knowing what to say no to and why. Businesses and nonprofits get inundated with marketing options and offers every day. We help you cut through all that noise, focus on your specific needs, and develop actionable strategies that are doable and actually make sense. Whether it's websites, SEO, email, social, or traditional channels, we're experienced in all of it. So if you need help figuring out your marketing, visit our website, clevergrowmarketing.com, and get in touch. So far, this has been a great conversation, but we should probably back up a little bit and talk about what you actually do. So what does an occupational therapist do, and how is that different from physical therapy or speech language pathology?
So specifically pediatric occupational therapist, because that's what I am. We help children to meet developmental milestones, sensory challenges, achieve activities of daily living, and promote regulation in children. So I like to say or like to think that we help kids do what they need to do and achieve their highest level of independence and individual potential, regardless of what the skill is. So we work on a myriad of skills to help kiddos be successful and to help families feel successful with their kiddo, because in the world of pediatrics, it's not just treating the child, you're treating the whole family unit.
Right.
As well as educating those around the child and the family as well, whether that be school, school professionals, other family members, because we are really good detectives. Occupational therapists are really good detectives in assessing not only the child and the family, but the environment in which that child is in. Because sometimes it's not just about treating the child, it's about helping to modify the environment so that the child can be successful.
What might some examples of that be?
Well, movement break, like we were talking a lot about movement. Some kids need even more specialized movement breaks at school. So educating those within the school environment to help provide those movement experiences. Some kids need very specific sorts of movement, whether it be like rotary movement, linear input, depending on how the child responds to the movement input. Sometimes it is helping to provide grab bars in sort of situations so they can be more independent with activities of daily living.
Right.
Sometimes it is adjusting heights of chairs or tables so that it's a more appropriate level to support postural control and support. It really is individual to each child and each environment, and that's part of the fun of it. No day is the same in the world of pediatric OT.
Yeah.
It's each,
Every kid is unique. Every
Yes.
challenge is unique.
Yes,
Yeah.
and every
Although
environment.
there's some commonalities, but still.
For sure. But looking at, a child might function one way in one environment, but then you take them to another environment,
Right.
and it's a whole new ball game.
Right.
So it's being mindful of each context that the child is in as well.
What are some common issues you see? Like we talked about commonalities. What are some common things you see, and what are some simple things parents can do at home to kind of address some of those common issues?
My area of expertise is in the area of sensory integration, autism, and really looking at positive mental health promotion in children. Our roots in OT are actually based in mental health. A lot of therapists, specifically adult therapists, kind of work in the world of phys-dis, physical disabilities, like post-surgery sort of stuff. But our roots are in mental health. So I've taken a very keen interest in that. So the kids that I specifically see, I deal a lot with regulation and how to make kids from a social emotional standpoint a little bit more regulated so that they can enter environments and partake in activities of daily living in more of a Zen sort of state. So movement, I always recommend movement to parents. Proprioception. So being that touchy-feely family, like giving the deep pressure hugs is very, very regulating for kids. That's an easy one. Heavy work, pushing, pulling, jumping, lifting. Those are all essential for children. So giving them chores to do. Having them carry a heavy basket of laundry. Obviously, to their, not to the point to where we're going to injure someone, but giving them opportunities to partake in what I call heavy work. Because if you think about how we start off in utero, you're in a very tight space. You're in the fetal position. You have constant proprioception. You're basically in a big bear hug the whole time. It's one of our most primitive senses. It's one of the first to develop, so it's very calming.
Okay. That's why babies like to be swaddled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's why as adults, massages are so relaxing because you're activating the proprioceptors. You're getting all that deep pressure, and it's relaxing.
Okay.
So giving kids opportunity for heavy work, which is proprioceptive input, as well as, kind of the calming movement, like I said, because again, in utero, every time mama moves and takes a step, baby gets that gentle rocking. So from a sensory standpoint, going back to our most primitive sensory systems, giving opportunities to partake in experiences that are going to activate both the vestibular and the proprioceptive system. Giving opportunities for open-ended play, too. Very often when we have a kiddo that isn't achieving something, we focus on what they're not achieving. And so we take kind of a top-down approach that I'm just going to help my kid practice the skill over and over and over until they achieve it.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, though.
Yeah.
You got to start from the bottom up and look at one, how can we make this playful? Because the kiddo's not going to partake in whatever you're trying to do if you're not taking a playful approach.
Yeah.
Nor are they going to naturally, just with practice, be able to achieve what you want them to achieve. So there are very often a bunch of underlying skills, and open-ended play allows for that a little bit more.
Also, I think kids, just based on my own personal parental experience, when you approach kids who have an issue as if they're a problem and not a person, and every conversation is about that issue, they start to really just either feel pressured or they tune you out.
Yes.
And they just shut down.
Yes.
And so, even though it can be difficult, you kind of have to check in and just be like, no, we're not talking about that. We'll deal with that later.
Kids
We're gonna,
are far more perceptive,
Yeah.
and they realize, they know very, depending on the age, obviously, and where they are cognitively, but kids know when something is hard. They know when something is, wrong.
I'm not meeting mom's expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so the way I do my evaluations has drastically changed over the years, because I don't think it's healthy and good for kids to necessarily hear their parents all the time talking about what's wrong or the bad. So,
they're not doing well.
Exactly. So when I do my evaluations now, I always start with a phone conversation with the parent to gather as much information I can over the phone before boots on the ground, like we actually ever meet, so that we don't have to have those awkward, necessary, because each parent is their own expert on their individual child, first and foremost.
Right.
So it's so important for me to gather all that information from the parent, but not necessarily in front of the kiddo.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a sidebar, but hugely,
think that's important.
a hugely important piece.
So we've touched on this a little bit so far in this conversation, but I kind of want to dive a little deeper into how movement relates to literacy. So we're doing this conversation as part of our partnership with the Literacy Cooperative and Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. So we thought you'd be a perfect fit for this. And I know you've talked about how motion impacts language acquisition and literacy skills. I'd love for you to dive in a little more and tell us more about that.
It's interesting because the CDC recently, after COVID, which I won't get into that, changed the developmental milestones for children from a language standpoint. And I know a lot of, kind of upset SLPs, regarding the changes that they put in for language development and acquisition. But they took out crawling as a developmental milestone completely altogether.
Wait, what?
It's no longer a milestone, which...
Isn't it like turning over, sitting
so rolling,
up,
but crawling is no longer a developmental milestone according to the CDC. Crawling from an occupational therapy standpoint is very important and is linked to literacy, early literacy. You wouldn't think so, but it is actually very important for lots of different reasons. When we are born, when we are babies, we are born with two-dimensional sight. We don't see in 3 dimensions. What needs to happen is movement through space and far point focus to near point focus, and going back and forth between far point and near point focus to develop what is called binocular vision, to where both eyes are working together to send signals to the brain to where we see in 3 dimension.
Fascinating.
So the way that we do that is through crawling, because when babies crawl, they have to look up
To see where they're going.
to see where they're going. Then they have to look down back at their hands because they're still learning about where their bodies are in space. Then they look up, then they look down, as well as reciprocal, both sides of the body moving, which communicates from both sides to the brain across the corpus callosum, which again, that crossing midline plays into reading.
How?
Both sides of the brain, whoop, there's the mic.
I do that all the time, don't worry.
Both sides of the brain have to communicate to each other in order to read.
Okay.
And crawling promotes that.
So it's building the parts of the brain that are
Setting
also
those,
used
setting
for
down
reading.
those neural pathways that you talked about earlier,
Interesting.
as well as all the great motor skills that are needed as far as shoulder stability, wrist stability, tactile exploration. I very often see so many kids that have tactile aversion. If you're looking like from a sensory, that don't want to partake in the messy play, don't want to touch that food, won't finger feed. Activity of daily living, won't finger feed because it's a sensory issue, because they never got that weight bearing, that proprioception through the hands to desensitize the hands to then want to use them.
And is that, I think I read recently, like too many babies are sitting in car seats. And so they're not moving the way
They're not moving.
should.
They're not getting
or
the-
not car seats, but bouncy seats or whatever.
Yep, I call them containers.
Yeah,
the container
and
babies.
so because of that, we're having this issue more
Yes,
often.
Yes. And then you're lacking the core stability that is needed for upright posture and also speech production. If you don't have a solid core, your diaphragm doesn't have the move to expand and contract in order to have good speech production. So it's all connected.
That is fascinating. So as parents, how do we help our kids learn to set healthy boundaries around physical play and exploration, especially with their peers? My thinking is we want kids to go out, kind of push boundaries a little bit and
Yes,
do the
kids test
jumping
limits,
and
yes.
the running and all the things, test limits. But we also, if our kid has a particular issue, we also want them to know kind of where they should draw the line in order to stay safe.
I think teaching kids to ask for help, and then teaching parents to not jump in too soon. So it goes both ways. Kids test limits. They need to be able to learn through doing. And there's a lot of learned helplessness out there that I see with children. So kids need to be given the opportunity to fail, because failure in a backwards way creates independence and success.
Failure is a great teacher. It is a great teacher.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So as parents, specifically when you have a child that struggles with something or has been given a diagnosis, or when you want to jump in, I feel like even sooner. And I can speak to that from experience, because my own child has her own set of issues, chromosomal and physical, born with a club foot, yada, yada. And I have wanted to jump in quicker with her than my other two. And so it's setting boundaries with me to give her the grace and the space to fail and struggle, which is hard to see your child struggle, but that is going to build her independence and her own self-learning. She's got
And
to
self-esteem.
do it. And self-esteem, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when you add in the social component, though, of it, it makes it a little bit tricky, because you don't want kids to potentially get bullied or for not being able to complete things to maybe the same standard or quickness of peers. So that's where, education in the classroom of accepting differences, I think, comes in.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, how you kind of turned the question a little bit about, like, you had to teach yourself boundaries as a parent.
Yes.
And I think that's so true. In hindsight, I realized what a helicopter mom I was.
Yes.
And my kids are great, they're successful people, whatever. But like there are things I realize I didn't help them. I kind of hindered them a little bit because I was so eager to jump in and help because of course you don't want your kid to suffer. So that's so interesting to me.
I think to giving, teaching children that all feelings are okay to feel. So like I said, I do a lot of work with kids on regulation. So it's not setting the boundary with them that they can't feel their feels. Every single feeling is valid. Everyone feels angry at some time. I'm not telling that you can't feel angry or frustrated or out of control. We all feel out of control sometimes. Where the boundary needs to be taught is how you deal with those feelings.
Right.
What sensory strategies can you use? Who are your trusted people that you can go to? So those are the boundaries I feel like that we, need to work on teaching children not to not feel your feels, but how do you manage it so that things go more smoothly and so that you can, again, do the things that you need to do.
Yeah. So based on what I'm hearing you say, you as a pediatric occupational therapist, you're not just teaching kids how to move better and produce or conduct tasks. You're also helping them emotionally and
Absolutely.
like how to
a lot of social emotional work.
Yeah. It just that's so fascinating to me. I didn't know that was
because we're a whole
within your
person.
realm.
We're not just a body.
Yeah.
We're a whole person, and that social emotional piece is key.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to cover that we haven't talked about related to these topics?
I mean, I feel like I could talk about all of it forever, although I feel like I'm not always the most articulate. I have like all these thoughts in my head, like, oh, this is this, but it doesn't always come out like
maybe
correctly.
Key
but
takeaways related to helping your kids.
What I would say is early intervention is key, and to trust your parental instinct, and to not necessarily play the wait and see. I think it's better to seek out assistance from an occupational therapist or another professional, and say, hey, like, I just think that, my kiddo, like, isn't doing this, and I think they should be. I think it's better to maybe seek out another opinion or talk to someone and just see that I might say, or another therapist might say, no, I think your kiddo's kind. Let's just try this. Or they might say, you know what, let's just start a small little course of therapy. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
Because what we know from neuroplasticity is the earlier we set down those brain pathways, the easier it's going to be for them later on. Getting back to that social emotional piece, later on it gets harder from a social emotional piece. So if we can help them early on, let's catch it there. So that later on things go smooth.
Don't do the wait and see.
Yes.
Trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
And if you've listened to our episode with Sarah Winchmaki recently, she talked about how to find help, how to find therapists, professionals like you. But in the meantime, how can people find you and tell us about your practice? And
I'm very unofficial. So I've worked in schools. I've worked in various small private practices. I worked for the clinic for years. And when COVID hit, I needed to spread my creative wings. There was no way I could have therapeutic use of self in a hazmat suit working with children. So I decided to do things differently. So I run a small little private practice out of my home. We built a wing to where I truly have a space to do what I need to do with kids and families. That being said, it's very unofficial. I don't have a website. I don't have it's very much word of mouth. But if you're interested in the services that I provide for anyone out there, just shoot me an email. It's wendyroberts21@yahoo.com. I call myself Hope House Development.
Cool.
Center
We'll
for Development.
Put that on our webpage so that people can find you.
It's very unofficial, but I like to think that
if you ever need a website, I know someone who can help you.
Okay. I like to think it's impactful, though. I love working with kids and families, and it's my passion.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've learned so much today. Good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I know this will be very helpful to a lot of people. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's a Hard No is a production of Clever Girl Marketing, my little agency in Cleveland, in partnership with our friends at Evergreen Podcasts. Many thanks to our amazing team, including Maura Del Rosario, our production and marketing coordinator, Noah Fouts, our amazing producer, editor, and composer who wrote our theme music and performed it with his band, The Big Leagues, and our new video producer and editor, Kay Holmberg. You can find show notes and resources on our website, and you can find other fun stuff on our socials. We're Hard No Podcast. Find your no, then say it with me.